Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today we have the STEM Next Opportunity Fund Fellows back. That's right. You spoke, we heard you. And today's topic is a personal favorite of mine. It's one of my focus areas when I do my work, but it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Those two words, computer and science, make some of us want to run away from home. But as staggering as the shortage of STEM educators is across the board, it's perhaps most pronounced in the field of computer science. Just on the other side of this topic are classrooms filled with students born with devices almost in their hands. My 4-month-old upstairs is always looking at the screen every time it turns. And I can tell you right now that my 10-year-old, when she was 2, would walk up to the TV and kind of try to swipe it when something was on that she didn't like to see. They couldn't be more curious or competent in all things technical. Add to that the computer science, specifically big data analysis, AR, VR, and more, represent the frontier of STEM opportunities around the globe. And you have just the setting for our discussion today. How do we empower educators to train tomorrow's computer scientists, both in school and out of school, in equitable and accessible ways so that they're prepared to forge the future? Presented by the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice and STEM Next Opportunity Fellows. Special thanks to STEM Next Opportunity Fund and TIES for making today's webinar possible. For those of you new to this initiative, the STEM ecosystem, supported by TIES, which you can find at stemecosystems.org, harness the power of business and industry, funders and foundations, K-12 schools, higher education, and more to find solutions to common problems and to build thriving communities. The STEM Next Opportunity Fellowship provides opportunities for STEM education experts to contribute their knowledge, skills, and expertise to support federal agencies to expand access to STEM education. STEM Next Opportunity Fellows experience firsthand working in a federal agency to ensure that more students access great STEM learning in and out of school, and fellowships range from 1 to 4 years, depending on agency needs and funding. Fellows receive access to high-quality training and ongoing professional learning through STEM Next Opportunity Fund initiatives and programs. And embracing the ecosystem way, today's webinar will provide a space and time for leaders to share common challenges, ideas, and resources. My name is Jeremy Shore, and thank you for joining us today for a conversation as we explore the STEM Next Opportunity Fellows and think about ways that we as ecosystem leads might link arms with these fellows and truly advance STEM education for all students. We're joined by 2 really, truly incredible panelists that I'm excited to learn more about. First is Dr. Quincy Brown, a senior policy advisor for STEM education policy, serving in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. A computer scientist, Quincy's expertise includes human-computer interaction, intelligent tutoring systems, mobile learning, and educational game design. She's joined by Zarek Drozda. Zarek is a data science fellow at the Institute of Education Sciences, focused on data science and data literacy education. His work includes building awareness for data literacy education, providing technical assistance to states and districts, and facilitating research to improve pedagogy and practice. I mentioned this already before, but you've got that little chat window. Make sure you let us know who you are. Many of us will be participating in the chat with you and answering your questions. Quincy, unfortunately, isn't able to access the chat due to the restrictions that are on her machine, but the rest of us will do that. And if there's good questions for Quincy, we'll make sure those get to her. More importantly, though, you've got that Q&A button down at the bottom. That's where we'll be reaching for your questions. Make sure you click that. If you have any questions at all about implementation, about your projects, or if you have things that you want to share with Zarek and Quincy, I know they're eager to learn from you as well. You also can look at those questions and vote them up by pressing the thumbs up button. That'll help us to know which questions are resonating with the most people. All right. So Quincy, I know this group has been following along with the 5-year STEM strategic plan, and I'm sure everyone would love kind of an update on some of the co-STEM work and any opportunities to plug into the work of OSTP.
Sure, thanks. And I'm super jealous now that I can't see the chat or the questions or the thumbs up or any of that. But so again, forgive me for not responding. It's just that I can't see it. So again, I am Quincy Brown. I'm a senior policy advisor here at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And I thought I would begin by kind of sharing some information at a high level about OSTP, right? And where my office is, where I sit in OSTP. So the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy was established, you can go to the next slide there, was established in 1976. Right, by Congress. We are part of the Executive Office of the President, And our role is to advise the president and others in the EOP, called EOP, Executive Office of the President, on STEM aspects of the economy, like national security, homeland security, health, the environment. There are 6 divisions in OSTP. Each administration has an opportunity to shape OSTP. And I'll say that, you know, what's really awesome about where I sit is in the Science and Society division. And so this is the first ever policy division that's been focused on the intersection of science and society. Typically, OSTP will have a science division, but President Biden established this division to kind of not look just at the science, but also the impact of science on individuals, on communities. And so I think, you know, speaking to you all, the STEM ecosystems people, I think that's hopefully music to your ears. Our team is built on the recognition that it isn't enough just to pursue the scientific breakthroughs, right? We also have to address the urgent questions about who gets to lead that science and who gets to reap its rewards. And so STEM equity really does sit at the center of our work, and we're driven by the mission of creating a STEM workforce that reflects the diversity of the nation, whether it's in the classroom or boardroom or an operating room or in the lab. And it's really critical to us that everyone participate in and contribute to science and technology, because it really is the bedrock of some of the groundbreaking insights, and it's how America remains competitive. And, you know, most importantly for me, it's also the right thing to do. And so part of our work includes engaging with the American public. And so we've been doing this in the first year of the administration. We've worked to support teachers, not only to, you know, address COVID-19 learning losses, but also hear about their innovative ideas, right, for science and technology of the future. We had an initiative called Time Is Now, and that initiative started this past summer. And we held 5 roundtables, which was an opportunity for us to hear from the public about their issues with regard to STEM equity. And so those happened in summer and fall. We took all of that information and launched a national ideation challenge. That was the Time Is Now Ideation Challenge. That was also in the fall. And we received over 250 responses from the American public. And we're using all of that information, as well as, you know, information from other parts of our work, to really create a national STEM equity plan. And that will be available later this year. And so a few key pieces of the work that I do that I wanted to share, kind of going down into the weeds just a little bit, since Jeremy mentioned the strategic plan, is kind of where this sits. So there is called NSTC, the National Science and Technology Council, right, that coordinates science and tech policy across the federal government. Underneath the NSTC is the Committee on STEM Education. And so we refer to that as COSTEM. And so COSTEM is the body that puts out the federal STEM education strategic plan every 5 years. And then under COSTEM is a subcommittee on the federal coordination in STEM education. So that's kind of the relationship. We're starting at the highest level with NSTC, and then we move down into COSTEM and then into FCSTEM. And so FCSTEM is the entity that, and Zarek and I sit on a few of the FCSTEM working groups together, but FCSTEM is the entity that kind of works through implementing the strategic plan and developing the strategic plan as well. And so next slide. So the current strategic plan was published in 2018. That was, the current plan is the second plan. And it's 5 years, so that will run to 2023, and there will be a new plan put forth then. And so this current plan has 3 goals. One is focused on STEM literacy, another is on DEI in STEM, and then the third is on preparing the workforce for the future. There are 6 interagency working groups. You'll find information about STEM ecosystems in the strategic partnership work, IWG. There's one on convergence education, where we are looking for ways to support transdisciplinary education. There is another on computational literacy, where we're really looking at how to make computational literacy an integral part of education. There's transparency and accountability that's focused on metrics, as you would imagine, and assessment. There's one on inclusion in STEM that's pretty much as it describes, DEI in STEM. And there's another, a sixth, on veterans and military spouses and their careers in STEM. And so hopefully at the end of my slides, there are links, but maybe someone is dropping links in the chat for some of the reports. So the Veterans and Military Spouses in STEM group put out a strategic plan towards the end of this year. There was also a report on best practices with regarding to the federal STEM workforce that was put out by the Inclusion in STEM IWG, and then there's an annual progress report that that's publicly available as well. And there should be links for all of that for people to read, see, how the groups are coming along towards meeting the goals that they've set out. Let's see, on the next slide, there are some other pieces of our work, which includes the Presidential Awards portfolio. So there are 6 awards that OSTP manages. One is the Fermi Award, and that is done with Department of Energy. It's focused on lifetime achievement of scientists. There are the national medals. There's one for technology and innovation that we do with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. There's another focused on science that we do with the National Science Foundation. And for those awards, people can be nominated to receive those awards. And there are committees. There are committees that go through and kind of review the nominations and then do the selection at that level. There is the Presidential Career Award for Scientists, the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers, which we call PCASE. And that one is focused on early career scientists and engineers, whereas the top 3 that I mentioned, the Fermi and the National Medals of Tech and Innovation and Science, are kind of for those in their later stages of their career. The 2 that I think are hopefully of most interest to this community are the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching, we call that PAMST, and that recognizes K-12 teachers every year. It alternates between K through 6 and then 7 through 12, so that it alternates years. Though it's called PAMST with the math and science in the title, computer science teachers are now part of that as well. And so we recognize teachers from across the country each year. Again, teachers can be nominated, and then there's a process that happens kind of at the state level and then at the national level. Similarly, for the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Science, Math, and Engineering Mentoring. So we have an award for mentors as well. Last month, we're in March now, so in February, the president announced the awardees for both awards. So there should be links again for the announcement, as well as that list, like who all of the awardees are, as well as links for the award ceremony for the teacher award that's online. I believe it's in YouTube, and as well as the PAMST and PASMIM, the organizations that run those awards and manage those, for their websites as well. Those applications open in the summer, I think sometime in August. I don't know the exact date for 2022, but they'll be open again in August. And people from anywhere can nominate teachers. And then there's a selection process that happens at the state level and then at the national level before the awards are made by the president. So that is our awards portfolio. The last thing I'll share is we have a few of the whole of government approaches to STEM education, STEM equity that I think you all might be interested in reading about. So it's a lot of links here. I'll just kind of go through them and then you can review them at your leisure. So the first is a national strategy on gender equity and equality. So this is the first ever national strategy of its kind. Part of the strategy really does take an intersectional approach that really looks at kind of the compounding impacts, right, based on someone's identity and the parts of their identity. And so there's a link there for the strategy. I'll note that the strategy does include science and technology as one of the 10 priorities. So that was something we were really excited about. Climate is another of the 10 priorities. So I think that's really exciting that science and tech are part of the gender equity and equality strategy for all of government. There's also been some efforts with regard to quantum education. I believe I shared last time I was with you all. So there's the Q12 Education Partnership. there is there was an education and workforce strategy that was released on February 1st. So that link there is to the announcement, and then the link there to the actual strategy itself. So that might be interesting to some folks. One of the things I'm super excited about is, we call it Space STEM. So the Vice President tasked OSTP at the National Space Council meeting that was in early December with using space to inspire students in STEM, and also identifying and addressing barriers in the space workforce. And so they also published the Space Priorities Framework, so you can see that. And in the document, as well as in the meeting, there are references to STEM and STEM education, and really, it's to me heartwarming that the president and vice president understand the value and importance of this work and the work that we do and the work that you all do, and it really kind of charged us with moving that forward in the space sector. There's also a strategic plan for AI education, for AI research and development that includes references to education and workforce. And then the National AI Initiatives website has some description of their efforts with regard to education and training, and similar for the nanotech, for the nano office, where they do work with regard to education and workforce as well. And so they have a strategic plan. Their plan actually has a goal of STEM education. I think it's their fourth goal in their plan. And so that is one that, again, excited that people are being explicit about the need to focus on STEM education in all of the disciplines. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how all of that can come together later. And I think that's it for me, Zarek. The last slide there just has links to the 5-year plan, the Time Is Now roundtable, some of the strategies, and the other documents that I mentioned in my earlier remarks.
And if you didn't notice a little bit ago, if you scroll up in the chat, Lauren, under I think the STEM ecosystem's name, put a link to this deck. I know there's a lot of data there, a lot of links, but you've got access to it, so you can grab all of those offline as well. Thank you, Quincy. Zarek.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be speak with you all today. I'm excited for this short overview of both Quincy and my work, but also the discussion that will hopefully proceed, and to get into really some of these questions around how we think about emerging technology and integrating them into an existing K-12 ecosystem. I wanted to start off with just like a super brief overview of where data science, data literacy, AI education is kind of from the field perspective. So it's a quick background. I'm serving as a one-year fellow at IES, the Institute of Education Sciences. And IES is ultimately a statistical and data agency, so doing work on things like NAEP assessments or collecting data on districts and student learning from across the country. So we have a lot of kind of natural interest in this subject in particular. There's a lot of effort around the country. It's I think a surprising amount of momentum for data science, data literacy education. So this is like a quick snapshot of just some of the SEA, the state education agencies that I've spoken with over the past six months, who are doing a number of things to try to integrate some of this like new 21st century content. Variety across state frameworks, CTE pathways, developing high school courses. Not mentioned on here are a number of after school efforts that are happening at the local level that are being threaded throughout different states. So I think it's just good to kind of start off with like a lay of the land of where some of the action is for a lot of this work. And I think you could see the same spread for some of the efforts that Quincy mentioned, whether it's on AI education or it's the new quantum Q12 partnership. There's a lot of energy for these new tech spaces, and just really excited to be a part of it and help facilitating it from the federal level as much best I can. I want to really quickly dive into definition of data science and related fields, and this is just how I and some of the the K-12 researchers think about it. I think the risk of a lot of these terms, whether it's AI or data science or bioinformatics, right? That they're in some cases buzz terms that are used by industry or used by academics who are promoting new technologies, and in a lot of cases the definitions aren't totally certain for every field yet. I think, when we're talking about data science, it's often a combination of math, stats, computer science, domain knowledge, which I think a lot of folks in the data industry really emphasize, because in order to be an effective data scientist about a particular topic, you have to have some background knowledge on the subject that you're working with. And then I think a fourth one that is both true for data science and also I think true for AI and quantum and some of the other areas is a thread around civic responsibility. Within data science, it's often called data ethics, right? But it's this idea of, are we using data and these new technologies for good? Is it, re-entrenching existing bias? Is it causing harm, out in the world as these new technologies are scaled and implemented and start to permeate across industries? So I think there's a lot of interesting, I've seen curriculum built in that area. I think that researchers are tackling that issue. Just starting to get around to how do we build a kind of a muscle for civic responsibility for our students. I also wanted to just briefly cover some of the work that I'm doing at IES as a fellow, and some of the work that will hopefully continue after my fellowship. As I had mentioned at the outset, the Institute of Education Sciences, we are a statistics and data agency. So I think there's a lot of ongoing efforts internally to modernize our existing processes about how we handle data on school districts that we report out every year, that administrative data, or how we administer NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Our division's working pretty much around the clock to add new data science methods. And I've been articulating that if we're doing that, we need to make sure we're building a talent pipeline of people who can come into government and employ data science skill sets, and also share the knowledge with all students to make sure that all students have equal access to those types of opportunities. So did a couple, just at a high level, I've done a couple things over the past roughly a year. So we had a technical working group where we brought in some experts, the handful of folks who are working on K-12 data science education programs, to come in and talk about the barriers they see, how they design their programs, and you really just kind of get a group think of some of the experts in the space, and start getting down the problems, right, and the additional research that needs to be done to understand how the most effective ways are to teach students about data science or AI or new technologies. We're also working on implementation guide for school and district leaders to think about how to pilot new programs in these emerging tech education spaces. I think navigating just the terminology of AI, data science, and quantum can be sometimes overwhelming for a district leader or a principal who doesn't have much exposure or background in these areas. And so we're hoping to create just a little bit of context for them to kind of get the foot in the door, and then also a checklist to help. All experts need checklists. So we're hoping to create, kind of a set of really helpful reminders for ways to build a pilot effectively and how to set it up in a way that it can improve future courses that are offered, and contribute to the evidence base in a really early stage for some of these fields in K-12. And the final thing that I've been trying to get off the ground is showcasing how data science is already assessed in some of the NAEP assessments around around subjects. I listed math as one example. I think you could see applications in science or technology education, computer science, etc. And then a final fourth one that's not mentioned on here is this is really early stages, but we're hoping to create some sort of national data science challenge for high school students that IES would facilitate in some way. And this would be either an after school activity or an in-school project where kids would be given a data set, have a problem statement they have to solve, and then analyze the data and work with it and create a really compelling presentation about what they found, through their work with the data. And we're hoping that that could be kind of a catalyst for more interest and expanding student opportunities in the space. And we're looking for stakeholder input, advice, ideas on how to best set that up. So if you have ideas, please get in touch with me. The last thing I wanted to flag is we have online, we did a data literacy webinar back in October that's available on www.ed.gov/STEM. The Deputy Secretary, Cindy Martin, headlined and keynoted, and we had a much more lengthy discussion about what data literacy could look like and how we can ensure that all students are data literate by time they graduate from high school. It's a increasingly important skill set across a variety of careers years. And so we talked about what are some of those foundational, emerging tech skills that can then feed into all the fields that Quincy and I are covering in this presentation. And then finally, would love to partner with folks. And if you have ideas, please feel free to reach out. I think the last slide I have in here is a quick screenshot of what this implementation checklist will look like. That should be coming out hopefully in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, thank you all so much. I'm excited for the conversation.
Zarek, the nerd in me and the former educator in me is super excited about that data science work. We know that it's really critical, right? It's something that's not only a direct career path, but it's something that the skill sets have implications for nearly any career path as we move forward into the future. I always talk about, people know that I talk too much about my siblings sometimes. And I think about people like my brother, who's a firefighter and paramedic. That's a career path that you wouldn't think was computer science, data science, STEM focused, but it's incredibly data focused. And if he had the skills and the tools and the ability to look back at the data that he's collected over the years, you might be able to make some big differences. And those are the skills that we want our kids to be ready to employ. So I know that the two of you have some questions for our STEM fellows and the other folks listening. But before we get to that, I'm hoping that we can go to a couple of questions from some of the STEM fellows and other folks who've submitted those. And the first up of those is Dawn. Dawn, are you there with us? All right, well, Dawn, if you end up coming back to the computer or figure out your microphone, just pop in. But I'm going to go ahead and ask the question for her while we're waiting. So Dawn's question was around AI. So we hear about it all the time. But at least in the news, when we hear about it, it's about these really large corporations, big projects, all of these kind of very high level things. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how AI is and maybe should be impacting education and what we should be thinking about in K-12 education regarding AI.
Quincy, you want to? Oh yeah, I can jump in first, and Quincy, please add. I think so. First off, I think artificial intelligence is an incredibly broad term that describes a lot of different things, right? And that term comes out of Silicon Valley. It describes, everything from Siri on your smartphone to amazingly complex predictive analytics that, tech companies are doing. On the back end to facilitate user experiences, to the more public kind of perception of what AI is, which is like smart robots running around delivering food or doing other tasks like that. I think so AI has the potential to be transformational. I think it is a perfect combination of using very large data sets to make predictive inferences about the world, and then also bringing that CS kind of computer program development skill sets to accomplish some sort of task that's useful to humans. I think with all the fears of automation and the way that everyone's always is talking about how oh my god, all of our jobs are going to be taken away by the robots. I don't think we're there yet. But I do think that planting the seeds and building a foundation for students, starting in middle school, if not high school, not necessarily engaging directly in building AI algorithms or machine learning models, but having an awareness of what the technology is and what it does, and what its limits are. And I think we're very, very far away from anything like Terminator. The technology is going to, I don't even think we're ever going to get there. And so I think also having knowledge about what the algorithms can actually do can help empower students rather than make them fearful of it. And I think that's a really important distinction, especially when you're tackling things like bias or the way that AI algorithms can, disproportionately, affect people in a variety of contexts, right? I think knowing what the technology does and how it does it can empower students to navigate that world much more effectively.
Yeah, and the only thing, one of the things I'll add to that, Zarek, is also understanding the ethics part of this, right? And so I think having some part of that in our K-12 education somewhere formally is really important because, right, technology is going to continue to evolve, but I think there's some basic core ethical ways of moving and using and developing and integrating and implementing technology that will persist, right, as technology evolves. And so having young people learn about that early, that there could be harms, right? We may not know the extent of what all the harms are, 20, 30 years from now, right? But the fact that having an awareness that there could be harm, I think is a big step, because there are, a lot of people learned that kind of late in the game, right? That something could be harmful.
I always think about that. Number one, the massive implication of AI on the last 4 years of politics, with social media, bots really shaping conversations in largely, I'm sure not exclusively, but largely negative ways. But I also always wonder, there are things that we said just a couple of years ago that AI could never do. Write a textbook, code. And now it's terrible at it, but it's doing it. That will continue. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what skills educators should be focusing on now that sets our students, our young people up for success in a world where some of the tasks that we, kind of thought were safe maybe aren't, and they've got to kind of forge a new way. So what are those skills that we need to make sure that our young people have?
I'm torn between two C's. I'm thinking critical thinking and computational thinking. Somewhere.
They're not mutually exclusive.
They're not, but I wasn't sure which one to say first. But I think just having an understanding of like how to think about problems and how to problem solve in a variety of domains, right, is really important, because again, the problems you may solve in 20 years or even 5 years, or 10 years, 3 years are, maybe different, right? The domain in which you're solving them may be different, but knowing how to solve a problem, knowing how to filter out and discern good data from, bad data, right? What information you need and what information you have, like all of those kinds of things, I think are foundational and will set students up to be able to solve, challenges or, identify opportunities that we can't even, imagine today.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Zarek, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, Quincy, I really like that, the computational literacy or computational thinking and critical thinking. I love that, kind of like that, you need both, right? I think another thing to throw out there that's super similar to data science, well, they're all interconnected, right? It's that I was an econ major in college, so I'm very skeptical of claims when people are like, oh, all jobs will be replaced, because creative destruction usually implies that just new functions are created. And I think with AI in particular, people who write textbooks, let's take that as an example. If we get to a point where AI can write entire books or entire textbooks, those jobs won't go away. Those same people who are working on writing the textbooks originally will just be working with the AI algorithms to perfect them, to edit them, to improve them, to give them the inputs, right? And so you're going to see permeation of AI into all the traditional careers, and those people are just going to have to interact and use the algorithms that use the models and know how to do that. And I also think actually in a lot of cases it will be relatively user friendly if they have a little bit of exposure and a little bit of background to coding and to data and to computational thinking, because today, most high school students, if they know how to just boot up R and they just run the program, can download a package that is a random a random forest package, and that is an AI algorithm, and they just hit you type 2 lines of code and you can run it, right? And so the access to these programs is already quite wide and quite a low cost, if not free in a lot of instances, and so we should be leveraging that to prepare people for how AI will be infused in a lot of careers rather than replacing them.
And I'll just add to that, right? I think to your last point, Zarek, people use them already, right? And I just wonder how many people understand that they are using AI. And so kind of it sounds like this, far away, futuristic, mysterious kind of technology, but it's here and young people use it all the time and their lives are shaped by it. I think Jeremy, you mentioned, right, it influences what they see on social media. So being able to make that explicit for people, say young people and less young people, being able to make that explicit for folks, that it's here, they are using it, and they can understand it, right? They can work with it. I think that is important as well.
My older daughter was showing my mom, her grandma, the other day about just kind of the power that she can download on her iPod, and she downloaded an app called iDetect, which makes the camera live, and as you show the camera around the room, it draws in real time boxes around everything in your room and labels them. That's a dog, that's a person, that's a cup, that's a TV, that's a laptop, and that's scary, maybe, but also incredibly cool and powerful. And the things that it's going to open up, along with those computational thinking skills, is really could be exciting. So one of the things that educators have to do is try to think about and predict what skills and what focus areas and what tools they should be using. And Deb has some questions about things that have come a couple of years ago and things that might be on the horizon. Deb?
Yeah, I was just curious about at what age do you think that that's appropriate to discuss with elementary, middle school, high school, and what does it take the place of? Because education is so jam-packed right now with so much that they have to cover. How do we foresee this coming in and adapting to what they already know or what that they're already learning?
Where does this fit? Teachers have 97,000 jobs. We know this is important. Where does this fit?
Right. Yeah, I'm a retired teacher, and I just hear it from the teachers all the time that, what more do you expect us to do? We're already counselors and 101 other things to do. But, and I see the significance of this and why it's important, but it's going to have to take the place of something or be incorporated into something else.
Thanks, Deb. Quincy?
I was going to say, I think it's kind of like this both and, right? I mean, the approach that the CS folks have taken is that, in their work is like is courses, right? But there's also been part of their approach has been in kind of integrating computing concepts into other content. So that's like I mentioned quantum. So that's a little bit of the approach that the quantum folks are using. And if you look at that Q12 partnership, there are resources there, but it's really about how you integrate the concepts into a physics course, right? Maybe through an example or an activity so that there's an awareness, more so than having, a full course on, quantum physics, right, in a high school, for example, right? So I think there's no easy answer. Zarek and I have talked about this a lot, so I know he's got some thoughts on this. But I think it's going to be important for the community and communities to kind of think through and understand how we, integrate these concepts without pulling, educators in, 20 different directions.
Right. Zarek, where does this fit?
Yeah, and Deb, I'm so glad you asked the question, because not only is it a question about where does it fit, but also we're in a context of just coming out of COVID, right? And multiple crises, right? In like education for teachers, labor shortages all over the place, right? So how can you expect to hire new teachers in these who have experienced these tech domains who are getting hired away by the industry is much better, higher paying jobs. And so I think that the landscape that we're, integrating into is really difficult. But I also think, with COVID, there is so many transformations happened over the past 2 or 3 years, right? Where, everyone being remote has accelerated all these changes, and so makes it all the more important. So anyway, those are like a couple of high level framing thoughts. To answer the question directly, to build on what Quincy shared, I think there are so many opportunities to integrate this into existing subjects. So data science, for instance, all the data science K-12 programs have been almost exclusive, well, not exclusively, but they have been very focused in the early days on integrating into K-12 mathematics and helping teachers teach statistics with data, or helping teachers teach algebra with data and data analysis and data tools, right? And so I think that is a perfect example of, this is a story of professional development and a training for teachers and bringing technology into existing subjects, and tweaking and modifying a few of the learning outcomes here and there to integrate some of these technologies into the existing curriculum silos. I think CS already provides a really great test bed for bringing in more AI. I think physics education probably could benefit from quantum, right? And you can start to draw lines between the new technologies and the kind of traditional K-12 subjects, and you add it in as units that can engage the kids in the other traditional content or teach it through the technology. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to make it manageable and to empower teachers rather than to demand it.
I think another really critical thing to think about with some of these topics, and data science is a perfect example, is that if you look at the big data analytics firms, they employ a lot of English majors, storytelling majors, people who aren't kind of specific STEM profiles, because the coding part of data analytics is getting easier and easier. The part that's remaining the same is you have to be able to use that data to tell a story, to get your point across, or to move the needle on whatever you're working on. So it's really kind of this exciting opportunity. That doesn't mean it's not hard, but it's this exciting opportunity to integrate all of these different subjects. Quincy?
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, a large part of my job, even though my background is in, I'm a computer scientist, is writing. And, I can read a lot of things and understand a lot of data, but ultimately someone says, can you write that up, write that up for me? And so being able to tell the story and communicate about, not just about what the data show, but like why it's important, why it matters, right? Why someone should care, what they should do based on what I've, been able to understand. I mean, that is how it gets to the next level, to your point, Jeremy.
I probably
Go ahead.
I probably spent 30 to 40% of my time as an artist thinking about how to visualize the data in the most compelling aesthetic way, to get the argument and the finding across. So yeah, totally agree. Just another example.
Yeah, and my slides were not very artistic. I'm not very. They were just all text that you might, kind of expect from a computer scientist. But yeah, I do think, it's super important in helping people understand all of these concepts.
And all that visual display of quantitative data stuff from Tufte and all those things are kind of really, they're exciting, and they're very cool. Part of this problem, part of this challenge too, though, is that a standard classroom educator with no CS background can absolutely jump in this, can integrate, can start doing some great things. But in order to have our kids who want to delve deeper into things like APCSA and all of these more difficult courses, we have to have computer science educators. I was lucky enough to be able to help lead the CS for Cleveland initiative, which is kind of under the CS for All umbrella. And we had a huge issue with this, with finding licensed teachers. And Kristen, I know, has some questions about this as well. Kristen?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So in Oklahoma, and I'm sure in other states, we're experiencing a teacher shortage, and we not only don't have enough regular classroom teachers, but we don't have enough computer science teachers. And you mentioned principals earlier not understanding some of these initiatives. We're still trying to explain to a lot of folks that computer science is not keyboarding. So for schools who are at the beginning stages or have yet to begin to implement computer science initiatives, how do we get them to see beyond the basics to new topics like quantum computing?
Yeah, Quincy, you want to start? I can. Okay. I think also fantastic question. I think so. First off, I think engaging parents and families in these conversations is really critical, right? You mentioned, folks are still, viewing computer science as keyboarding. I think outlining the careers in these spaces, right? Showing them the job numbers and the salaries that go with them can go a long way in being like just super clear, fine pointed about, this is a new era that we're in, and we're getting your kids prepared for that, for this new industrial age, information age. So I think building community with parents and families is really critical for that part of the conversation. I think on the shortages side, yeah, like 100% agree. Right, that there are labor shortages across the economy, especially in teaching, and so bringing in new skilled teachers, whether it's CS teachers or it is math teachers who have a background in data analytics, or physics teachers have a background in quantum. It's hard, and that's why the integration approach, I think, is really critical. I also think states are some states around the country are doing really innovative things to solve that problem. Maryland, for instance, is creating online data science course that will be offered as an elective. It'll be taught live, but by one teacher, and they'll do cross enrollment across all their districts in the state as a way to just find scale, right, and make do with the teachers that they have. And I think there are other opportunities to leverage the folks from career and technical education and folks who might be coming from industry who want to get into teaching and maybe want to do more work in the education space. And I think there's a lot of talent there that can be leveraged as well. And go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just gonna say, I want to also mention that I love when Kim Case is on these calls, because you'll see in the chat, like 9 times out of 10, when someone has a question like this, she says something like, "We developed a solution to that, and here it is." So there's a one pager that New Jersey developed for outreach in the chat that you should go ahead and definitely open up. Zarek, I want to get to a couple other questions, and this next one is, I think, pretty related. And then I know you've got a couple things you want to ask, and our time is short. Tom, are you there with us to ask your follow-up questions on CS and CS education?
Yes, I believe I am here now.
We hear you.
So, I sent in my questions, so I don't remember exactly all of it. And it's funny that you mentioned storytelling with data, because I looked at a data piece that I sent you. Our governor's office was bragging recently that 21% of our students are enrolled in CS foundational courses, which, according to code.org, is the highest rate in the nation. When I looked at that data, those data made sense, because that would be about the number of students that could be taking it at any one time. So those data are misleading, but the question itself that I had is, given the challenges of getting kids to take foundational computer science, how do we get beyond the foundational? Now that's a pretty similar question to what Deb Wilson asked, where does it fit?
So what's next after we get those foundational components in? How do we then take it to this deeper level where every child has access to some amount of CS understanding for that fundamental understanding of the world around them, and all kids who want it, all young people who want it, have access to deeper learning?
Well, so yes and no. So is it a progression, or is there, to use a term, a quantum leap? Do we have to get everyone to foundational?
Well, yeah, I think Tom, it's a similar question to what we discussed a little bit, but there's a very important nuance, which is that I think the CS education enrollment numbers are low, and there's a reason for that, right? The perceptions around the course aren't great. The access isn't 100%, right? It's probably 50% of high schools, I think, is what I saw most recently. This is why building those on-ramps from other traditional K-12 subjects in which students are already having to go through because of their existing requirements is really, really critical. We have to get students in social studies, right, who are really passionate about history, and we have to get students in the arts and English language when they're really passionate about literature, and connecting it to topics in STEM and coding. Well, not necessarily coding, but just data analysis and quantitative work to build on-roads into CS. And into data science, right? Data science, I think a lot of people push back and say it's not just a CS thing. It is multidisciplinary. It's not just in the CS silo. I also think, then on the flip side, right, the advancement pathways, what does that look like? I think within mathematics, you can have pathways, right? So you start with intro data science, you do stats, and then you do a course on machine learning, which then puts you in AI. Quincy, you could probably articulate a similar pathway for physics and right, quantum. So I think we don't have to reinvent the entire K-12 system. We can build on the existing subjects that we have, and empower people within those groups.
And I think I also think there's work to do on the post-secondary side, right? I mean, because of all of the realities of the K-12 system, that institutions become more innovative in their curriculum, in their course sequencing, recognizing that there are needs that students have coming in, right? So some of the developmental math, I know there's some places that allow you to kind of take your first CS course if you're also taking the developmental math course, right? There's some places where you can. And so depending on the number of semesters it takes you to kind of get to college level math, you're spending time not taking CS courses, right? Where you could be advancing in your major if you're able to kind of take those on parallel tracks. And so I think both sides need to come together to address this issue because of the demands, right? And the burdens that are on K-12, especially the past couple of years, right? There needs to be some give on the other end of that as well.
So I think that for your work, from the conversation that we had a couple of days ago, there's some stuff that would be valuable for you to know from those participating. So I'm going to throw up a poll here in just a second and have people fill that out. While people are filling out those couple of quick questions, Zarek, Quincy, I'm hoping you can maybe answer Shakia's question. She's asking, what ideas and recommendations of organizations can you provide to support K-12 partnerships with data science, computer science, AI? What organizations should people be reaching out to, joining, and so forth? And while you're answering that, I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll.
Quincy, you want to take first?
Oh, sorry, the poll popped up, and so I'm reading. I was like, ooh, a poll. I think, I think I'll let maybe Zarek can give specifics, but I mean, there are a lot of professional societies that people can join. I think there are, networks at, also coming out of like some of the museums and libraries where they have, supports for educators. I know the Smithsonian is one that has a lot of supports, as well as some of the other, agencies. NASA does a lot of work, and they have a good network there as well. So, Zarek, you have specifics that you want to call out?
Yeah, I think on my end, I have to stick to federal agency partners because we don't want to be endorsing anyone. But so Census has Data Academy and Statistics in Schools program, which is really great on-ramp into data world, data science, data analytics, a lot of great educational resources there. There's also data.gov, which just like houses, hundreds and if not thousands of data sets the federal government posts as part of their legal requirements and commitment to open data. That are a great base for activities. There are a number of K-12 associations and nonprofits who are jumping into this space. You can find them in AI, data science, quantum. We're hoping to create coordination between them. Quincy and I are working on some sort of effort to create more collaboration between those groups. We'll hope to share more soon there. And I also just really quickly addressing other things in the chat. I wanted to go back to something that Lisa said about assessments and also this conversation we were having about integration. I think over time, you're seeing the assessments start to move on what they are asking students about, new tech areas. For instance, a lot of the math assessments have been increasing the proportion of data analysis and statistics questions in their assessments. Changing that lever can also make a big difference in these integration conversations that I think can open up further room, more flexibility, right? Rather than demands here, demands there for teachers.
So I just shared the poll. You should both, I'm not sure about you, Quincy, with all your weird rules, but everyone else should be able to see it. Zarek, I'm wondering, we've just got a couple minutes. I'm wondering if you and Quincy could maybe talk us through a little bit these results and how those answers really kind of shape and impact your work, and maybe close out, if you don't mind, with what you could use from STEM ecosystems and how we can help advance the work that the two of you are doing. Quincy, Zarek?
I'll go first because something popped up and then I closed it. So I'm not sure what the poll says, but I will say, sorry. I will say that, what's helpful for us in advancing our work is a little bit on this side, Zarek just mentioned with assessments, right? I think it would be good. I'm always interested in understanding how people know what they're doing works, right? And so that is one of the things that, especially with regard to STEM equity, how they know they're reaching everyone. The question Tom had about, 21% of students in South Carolina, right? Like, who are those students and what kind of data are you collecting? And how do you know that you're reaching all of the students that you want to reach or can reach? And then how are you using that information to adapt your approaches? And so those are the kinds of things that would be helpful for us to understand how the community is thinking about these things. A little bit to the poll that we had, how you all are also thinking about coordinating across these various topics, or integrating them all, or just picking one? What approach are you using to like balance all of this is also good for us to know about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I also just picking up on, I think, a theme throughout all three questions in the poll. Like, I think predominantly this is overwhelming, right? There's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack, and especially with the challenges of teacher shortages and folks saying that the teacher shortages are particularly bad in STEM. I think at the same time, there is resources out there, right? The ESSER funds from American Rescue Plan and all the COVID money, like, that is an available resource that folks can hopefully tap into as, especially as districts look to see how to spend down those funds as deadlines come up. And I also think that, there's as horrible as the past 2-3 years have been, there's always opportunity to make something good out of a crisis, and to really think about what the most important learning outcomes are for our students. I think a great example in mathematics, teachers were going through their existing curriculums and really taking them apart and focusing on really depth on some of the core topics that need to be to get accomplished in a particular course or a particular school year. We should build on that and not just revert to the old curriculum and go back to the way that things were pre-COVID. We should build on all that work that was done and think about how we can leverage that going forward, to open up more room, to open up more creative ways to engage students in the classroom and use that time that was unpacked. So I think there are ways to point to the future in a way that's exciting and that can empower teachers through a difficult time.
Well, thank you, Zarek. Thank you, Quincy. I really appreciate you joining us today. Before we close, I want to mention a couple of quick upcoming things. The first, on April 13th at 1 o'clock, join Stephanie Rodriguez, STEM Next Workforce and Training Policy Fellow, for a roundtable discussion on the connection between STEM learning ecosystems and the public workforce system. Stephanie is eager to learn about how ecosystems are addressing workforce development and training in their efforts. Please come prepared to share more about how or if your ecosystem leverages federal workforce funding and has interacted with state and local workforce development boards. Speaking of opportunities to be together, we have a golden opportunity finally again to meet and share resources, ideas, and encouragement this summer at the SLE-COP Bay City convening coming up on June 20th through the 22nd. We'll have Raspberry Pi demos and lab exchange and E2Es from ecosystem leaders around the world, a pedal trolley, and more. The Bay City team is working closely with TIES and local officials to put a high level of safety protocols in place for participation, and we really hope to see you there. What a privilege it's been to sit together as colleagues in this work, STEM Next fellows and SLE-COP leads, thinking together about how these relationships might be force multipliers in advancing the causes that we all care so deeply about. I know we didn't get to all of your questions, but we're writing those down, and Quincy and Zarek have agreed to answer those offline, so we'll get those answered and back to you. Thank you very much to the STEM Next Opportunity Fund and TIES for bringing this webinar to us. I can't talk anymore. Melissa Moritz and distinguished STEM Next fellows, as well as SLE-COP leads and generous funders for participating in this lively discussion of truly global STEM education efforts. Don't forget that this is the first of a triathlon of webinars with the STEM Next fellows. And most importantly of all, thank you, Dr. Quincy Brown and Zarek Drozda, for your support and your answers today. I know I learned a bit, and I learned enough that it kind of scratched that itch, but I'm going to have to dig into all of the resources that you shared, and we really appreciate it. So thank you all, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you all.